welcome to Solosaurus, a podcast about one-player board and card games. My name is Brandon Waite.
My name is Carter Mackey.
And this is episode 17, where we're talking about the cutthroat quilt-making game, Patchwork. That sounds like two things that really shouldn't go together, but it definitely does if you've played it. And many people have played it because this game is crazy popular, and now that it has a new solo expansion, it's getting a lot of attention from the solo community as well. So we're going to be taking a look at that and letting you know how that plays. But first, let's talk about the news. First thing in the news this week is that Eggertspiel Games has announced Blackout Hong Kong, which is a big deal because it's a 1 to 4 player game from Alexander Pfister, who is famous for doing Great Western Trail and Oh My Goods and Mombasa. This is a guy who's widely regarded as one of the best Eurogame designers alive right now, and this is a very unusual kind of theme for a Eurogame. It's set in Hong Kong after the whole country loses power, and everybody's just trying to get through the day and take care of the things they need to take care of, while also trying to restore some kind of societal order so that you can have some good standing in the post-blackout Hong Kong world.
Awesome.
Yeah. Oh, it's a great theme. It has a really moody looking box cover, and it's Alexander Pfister. Everybody seems to love him right now. Personally, I can't think of that man's name without thinking about the Shut Up and Sit Down review for, I think it was Great Western Trail, where they made fun of his name by making up a pretend show called Fister, like the 90s sitcom Sister. Yeah, it's outstanding. If you don't listen to Shut Up and Sit Down, you definitely should. They're some of the best reviewers out there, and they're hilarious. So this is Blackout Hong Kong from Alexander Pfister. The second bit of news this week is that King Domino from Blue Orange Games and designer Bruno Catala has a new expansion called The Age of Giants. This is not a solo game out of the box, but if you remember, we did a solo review for King Domino using a user-created variant from Alexander Saranac. That was a great little variant, and one of our few complaints with the game is that the variant was just a little bit too easy. I suspect that you could very easily integrate this expansion in, and it would make the game a little bit more challenging. It adds objective tiles that give you points for building your kingdom in a certain way, and also adds giants who block off crowns on some of those tiles. So if you want to learn more about how that might work and how that might affect the gameplay, check out our previous episode on King Domino. But that is King Domino Age of Giants, which is out now. Third bit of news for today is that Brass Birmingham from Martin Wallace and Roxley Games. This is the re-implementation of Brass that came out on Kickstarter last year. So Roxley is famous for making really gorgeous games because they often will partner with artist duo, husband and wife duo, Mr. Cuddington. They did Santorini and just a beautiful, gorgeous, colorful artwork. Well, they redid Brass, which was hideous before, and now is one of the best looking games on the market. This is absolutely stunning.
I haven't seen it yet.
Oh man, you got to check out some pictures of this thing because it's grim. It's not colorful and fun.
Right.
But it takes the core mechanisms of classic Brass from 2007 and turned that into 2 games now. So one is Brass Lancashire, which is just a straight up remake of the old game. And then Brass Birmingham, which is, for many of the reviewers that I've listened to, they consider this to be a better version of the old game. It's streamlined a little bit, adds a new resource, beer, that you have to pay your workers with, I guess.
Right.
And otherwise keeps the same route building, industrial revolution, industry building fun, if you could call it that, of the original. What's neat about this is a 2 to 4 player game, which is one of the things that's kept me from getting it. But there is a solo variant on Board Game Geek from user Mike Taylor that's getting a ton of positive attention. And usually variants fly pretty far under the radar. But this one's been getting a lot of attention, a lot of comments. So if you have Brass Birmingham, check that out. If I get a chance to, I would love for us to cover that on the show. But that depends on me, actually picking up a copy of the game. Because no publisher wants to send you a game to review some Board Game Geek user's variant of it. So Hopefully we can do that in the future, but if you already own a copy, check out the variant from Mike Taylor. We'll try to put a link to that in the show notes here. The last thing for this episode is another bit of variant news, and that is for Root from designer Cole Worley and publisher Letter Games. This is a game that I've been playing a lot of recently, and I know that for a lot of people, the solo experience is pretty underwhelming because the main bot is pretty one note and how it builds up its army and everything. So if you have Root, I just think you should know there's Board Game Geek user Inconmon, that's INCONMON, has created what he's calling the Better Bot project for Root. So the idea is to make each of the bots a little bit more robust. In the main game, you just have the mechanical version of the Marquise de Cat, who ignores buildings and things like that that are central to how he normally works. This would change that up so he does use buildings and gives him a fuller feel while still keeping the upkeep minimal. And then he's also adding bot versions of all the other factions. So very cool project, one that's getting attention from the publisher himself. So we'll try to link to that in the show notes as well, but you should definitely check out the Better Bot project from Inconmon on BGG. That's it for the news this week. We're just going to head right into our review, which is for Patchwork. Patchwork is a 2014 game from Uwe Rosenberg and Mayfair Games that normally just plays 2 players out of the box. It's a polyomino style game, which have become crazy popular in the last few years. And I think this might be the one that kicked off the whole craze.
I think so. That sounds right.
It's wildly popular. We just looked it up before we started recording, and this is number 58 on Board Game Geek. It's number 2 in the abstract section and number 3 in all of Family Games. Obviously, Azul is the one that's sort of dominating both of those other lists, but 58 is really high for a small box 2-player tile laying game.
Yeah.
I think it gets so popular because the theme appeals to so many people. It's become a popular couples game, I think.
Yeah.
So the theme is inoffensive. It's very easy to pick up, and it's just gotten a lot of love over the years. But now you can get a 1-player deck from the Automa Factory from designers Morten Monrad Peterson and Lines Hutter. Now, Morten is the more famous of those two for me because he's the name I associate with the Automa Factory because he did the variants for Viticulture and Scythe and things like that. But Lines, if that's how you say his name, maybe Linus, I'm not sure. He's the one who's done several of the more famous variants on Board Game Geek. He's done a solo variant for Photosynthesis that's gotten him a lot of accolades recently. He's just very involved in that community. Well, these two guys have worked together to create an Automa deck for this game, apparently at no charge to the company, as a way of trying to get Mayfair's attention and help them realize, hey, we can make good stuff for you. So right now, the only way to get this is a little bit odd. You have to go onto the Lookout Games website and order the August issue of the Lookout Games magazine. Now, we live in the United States, so the cost for me to order this was, I think, maybe €2 for the actual magazine, and then $6 or $7 to have it shipped here. Anyway, it was about $9 or $10 total. I don't know what the exchange rate is right now. I'm just saying. It cost me $9 or $10. Not bad overall, although when you consider it's just a deck of cards, you have to choose if that's worth it to you. So you can't buy this in a store, but if you're interested, you can still get your hands on it. And that allows you to play the game 1 player against a bot. So we'll talk a little bit more about how that actually plays in a minute, but let's just start first with the components for Patchwork.
I really like the components a lot. I mean, I think the art in the game is good. The iconography for, I guess, button income, things like that, works really well with the art style. Cardboard's nice, thick, and chunky. The wooden components. I mean, obviously, I wish that buttons weren't just pieces of cardboard with printed buttons on them. I wish they were actual little blue buttons that I got to use as currency. But
that would be easy to upgrade if you really wanted to.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's not anything to take away from the game, but it's just, I desire that deeply.
Oh, I absolutely do as well. I like that the currency in the game are buttons to begin with, but it is a little silly that they included just little cardboard punch tokens for this.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess it's just an effort to keep costs down, but it would have been nice to have some plastic bits in here.
Right, yeah.
It has a couple of nice little wooden pieces to mark your space on the time track and to mark which pieces are available each round. It's just nothing fancy, right? It's a nice, solid production. For me personally, the look and feel of it is a little drab. I don't know why they chose a color palette that's so muted.
It is a very muted color palette.
Yeah, have you seen the new Patchwork Express?
No.
So this is releasing at Essen, I think, and it's Patchwork but with bigger pieces and maybe a grid that's got bigger squares on it so it plays even more quickly than this one does.
Do the pieces actually fit together?
Well, I don't know. We'll get to that in just a second. But it's brightly colored, so it actually looks nice on the table. Mm-hmm. This definitely, it's a little pukey. I don't know how to, that's probably not the right word, but that's what I think of. It's just kind of bleh because it doesn't have nice bright colors.
Right.
But otherwise, all the production stuff, nice tiles, like you said, everything there is fine. The main issue here is the tiles don't fit together. This could just be my copy of the game. But the whole point of this game is you're going to be drafting tiles and putting them on a board to make a quilt. And they're supposed to be little patches that fit together nicely and form a good-looking quilt when you're done. And it's like the edges of the pieces aren't cut straight.
They're not cut straight, and some of them are just cut too big.
Yeah.
They're just not the right size where they can fit into one another based on, I guess, what kind of angle or what shape the piece is. And the first time that happened in the game, it blew my mind. That in a game that's about patching together these little random pieces, that all of the pieces don't actually fit together.
I mean, I recognize that, production issues are things that are tricky to manage, right? But I've played other polyomino games and I've never had this trouble before. And so it just seems like a weird oversight, especially for a game that's had who knows how many print runs at this point.
Right.
So I don't know, that really detracted from the experience for me quite a bit. Like much more than I thought it would, because by the end of the game, you've got a board that's supposed to be full and feels satisfying to you, but it looks all wonky because it doesn't fit together properly. It's a little skewed on the board, and
right.
I don't know.
Yeah, some of the pieces kind of have to sit on top of the other ones.
Ugh. Yeah, it's one of the worst production mistakes I've seen in the game in some time.
Yeah.
So that's just something to keep in mind. Again, that could just be my copy of the game. Maybe you've got a copy and it's no problem at all. But I just thought it was a really bizarre problem to have.
Yeah.
But otherwise, components are fine. The price is a little bit more than I would want for this. The MSRP for this game is $29.99, which feels a little bit high to me considering what you get in the box. It's just some cardboard tokens, a couple of cardboard boards, and a few little wooden pieces.
Right. In a game that's being printed at, I would assume, incredibly high production rates.
Yeah, I would think so too. And I just don't understand how they justify that price. I do think that if you like this game, and a lot of people do, again, you'll certainly get $30 worth of play out of it.
Right.
But it just, for what you actually get in the box, physical components wise, I don't understand how they justify that. So just something to keep in mind as you decide whether this is a game that's a fit for you. But moving on from the components, I will say the rules for this game are very simple. Like, took me maybe 5 minutes to read through them. It has some odd little changes from what you might expect from a drafting and tile laying game. But even so, I still feel like they managed to keep the rules quite concise, and that was really nice for me, especially after the big box games we've been looking at for the last few episodes.
Yeah, they're real simple and clean rules, easy to, I guess, take down.
Yeah, very easy to see how it ends up so high on the family list on Board Game Geek. As far as the actual play of the game is concerned, this is one of those games that, for me, adds more crunch than you would think based on the rule set that you have in the box. So the rules aren't complicated, but there's some really good stuff to think about in this game.
Oh, absolutely.
The basic idea is you're going to set out all these different polyomino pieces in a ring around a central board that just tracks how many rounds are left in the game, or at least how much time is left in the game. Maybe that's a better way to say it. And you have a little pawn that shows you every turn which of those pieces in the ring are available for you to buy. So basically, the 3 pieces in front of that wooden pawn, wherever it is, are available for you this turn. And you can spin buttons from your central supply, and you're going to start with 5, I think. And you'll have those to spin on a tile. And if you buy it, you just add it to your board anywhere where you want to in this grid that sits in front of you. And your goal is to cover up as many of the spaces on this grid as possible before the end of the game, because every empty space is going to lose you 2 points. So there's a lot of tension right there just trying to fill up that board, because these are some really crazy shaped pieces.
Right. And the only thing that gets you points is buttons, and they're worth 1 point apiece. So, or it's easier to lose points than it is to get points, I would say.
Yeah, that creates way more tension than I thought it would, because just the idea of not losing points and trying to prevent yourself from losing points is very hectic. But yeah, the fact that you only earn points for buttons and they're only worth 1, whereas you lose 2 for not covering these things up, that's a great little puzzle to solve.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ways that works out in your main choices is that when you look at the tiles that you have available to purchase, there's a little bit of information on each one. So first of all, there's a cost in buttons to buy the tile. And then there is a little time marker, a little hourglass marker that shows you basically how much time it takes to sew this thing into your quilt. And when you buy this piece, you have to move your little time track marker up as many spaces on the central track as the number shown on the piece. What's interesting about that is turns don't just alternate in this game. So if I buy a big piece that has, 7 time to put this thing in my quilt, that means I'm going to move my space up on this track 7 spaces, and whoever is behind on the time track gets to take a turn. So Carter might choose, if we're playing a 2-player game, after I take a big 7 move, he might choose to get several smaller time pieces so he can take multiple turns in a row, which I thought was very cool.
Yeah, it's a cool tension of, okay, this tile is really good, but it's going to move me up really far ahead, and the other player is going to get to take multiple turns, or they just have the luxury of planning out their turns a little bit more because they have the space.
But then again, there is some benefit to shooting up the track too, because there are these little leather squares along the time track as you progress toward the end of the game, that if you're the first one to pass them, you get to add them to your quilt, and they're little 1 square pieces. And your pieces that you're putting into your quilt normally are going to be so wonky and hard to fit together, you're going to have empty spots on your board. So these do a great job of filling ones that you couldn't fill in any other way. So I don't know, it's like you want to shoot up on the track to be able to get those, because once they're gone, they're gone. But then you'd also don't want to give them more turns. I thought that was a really interesting thing. Plus, you have to balance all of that with the fact that some of these tiles that you're getting have pictures of buttons on them, and some of them don't. And this is one of the coolest parts of the game for me. When you put a tile that has buttons pictured on it in your quilt, then anytime you pass a picture of a button on the time track in the future, you're going to earn income of as many buttons as you have pictured on the tiles on your quilt. That's confusing, but basically, the more buttons you see pictured on the pieces you buy, the more money you're going to have to work with as the game goes by. That's a great little choice for me.
Right. And those pieces tend to be more expensive, so it's kind of a return on an investment. It's a nice tension.
Yeah, you will often be left with a choice of, do I want this cheaper piece that's going to fill up a ton of space, but may be harder to work around in the future because it's kind of an odd shape, but also, does get rid of a lot of those negative points, but doesn't provide me income? Or do I want the smaller piece that's easier to manage that does get me some button income later on? I don't know. I thought that was a great little tension there. I love that concept of building up a button economy, because things feel super tight in this game most of the time. Although by the end, you can often get, 14, 15 buttons at a time.
Oh, yeah.
If you've built up your quilt in the right way. Yeah, it's just, when I first heard about this game, I sort of thought, why do people love this so much? It's just drafting and tile placement. I get that's a fun puzzle, but I didn't know about the button economy here. For me, that's what sells the game.
Yeah, I feel like it's the button economy, and also you keep taking turns if you're the last player.
Oh yeah,
that's a really cool, trade-off too, that I really like. I like how that changes the game.
Yeah, I do too, and there are very few rules associated with that, and yet it creates a ton of tension. What adds to that, I think, is that you can choose whether to buy a tile on your turn or just to move up the time track whatever number of spaces it takes to get in front of the other player and you just get one button for each space you move.
Right.
So sometimes that's worth it.
Absolutely. And it's like if there's tiles that you can't buy or you don't want to buy, you can just do this instead and get income and not have to worry about taking those tiles.
Oh yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought about that. I don't know. I was just surprised by all the thought that goes into any one turn on this game.
And I would also say, like, all of these rules are pretty intuitive. You don't really have to consciously necessarily think about these things, which is why I feel like it tracks so well on, like, the family rankings.
Yeah, I'd say that's true. And which is odd, though, because it's not super grounded in the theme.
Right.
You know, usually rules are easier to keep in your head if they make perfect sense with the theme. Here they don't really. This is really just an abstract game that has a quilt theme on top of it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I still had no trouble with it. Probably just because there are so few of them, really.
Right.
You can hold it all in your head easily. It makes sense. And then when you get to the end of the game, what's really interesting about the end game here is, you know, you're building up more and more buttons as you go, and you can buy more and more cool stuff. But then at the end of the game, what is going to earn you points is how many buttons you have left. So there's a sense in which you want to buy more stuff at the beginning to build your economy, and then you want to be more frugal toward the end so you can save buttons so you have something that will actually earn you points. You start doing the math the further into the game you get, and you realize, okay, this tile is going to cost me this much, and yes, it has buttons on it, and that's great, but are there enough income opportunities left for me to make up for what this is going to cost me? But it can get as crunchy basically as you want it to get at the end. You can very clearly see how this would be a fun couples type game. It takes maybe 20 minutes.
That sounds about right.
20, 30, something like that. I've played this with the second grade kid that I mentor here at the local elementary school. He had no trouble getting the rules to this. It was a good tension-filled game. I really like that a lot. Oh, we forgot to mention, too, there is one award that you get for getting a 7x7 space filled before anyone else. That gets you 7 points, which is a pretty huge chunk in this game.
Yeah.
So there's sort of a race to fill in full 7x7 grid on your board. I don't know, there's just lots of good little things to think about here. So the addition of the solo deck, when I heard about this, I wondered how they were going to implement it, because trying to figure out how an AI would choose a tile around the ring is a little bit tricky. That can get cluttered real fast, I think. Yeah. But they do it in a pretty streamlined way. So if you buy the solo expansion for this, you're going to get 2 decks of 12 cards each. The only difference between them is one deck has nothing on the back side of the card except the logo for the automa. All you're going to do is on the AI's turn, you're going to flip one of these cards and just resolve what it tells you top to bottom. It'll tell you how many buttons the robot has to work with this turn, so you're not collecting pieces for it or anything like that. And it'll tell you how it's going to choose the tiles that you're getting for the turn. And it will just collect it. And that's really it.
Right.
So it keeps the pawn moving forward around the track nicely. And in that process, it can actually earn its own income as well. So generally, if it has more money to spend on its turn, it will have the possibility of earning less if it passes a little income marker. So that's how it works. So you are keeping track of buttons it's earning, but really, otherwise you're just stacking up the tiles and you'll evaluate them at the end of the game. That's pretty nice. It's very easy to manage turn to turn. I found the tile selection thing, that's definitely the trickiest part of the card, but I still found it pretty easy to manage.
Yeah, you definitely, you need the instructions to tell you how to, I guess, what the different icons mean. But once you learn them, it's really straightforward and fast.
Yeah, for my first game, I kept the rule book for this nearby, or the whatever the little printout is, because there are no English instructions that come in the little packet that you get in the magazine. So you do have to look those up on Board Game Geek in the files section. So just be aware of that. But
I think it's on their site now too.
Oh, it is on the site now.
Yeah, they have a PDF of it. I think. I found a PDF of it somewhere, like the official rules in English.
You can definitely get them on Board Game Geek, and we'll link to them in the show notes so you can just get them there. But it's just surprising to me how easy it is to follow. Very little time spent doing the upkeep, so the game moves along at a nice, snappy pace. And there's some good tension here, because at the end of the game on the easiest setting, if you haven't earned that 7x7 tile, then it's going to get it on the last turn of the game. Giving those 7 points is a pretty big deal for the AI. So it's a nice challenge, I think. I did blow the thing out of the water on the easiest setting.
Yeah, the easiest setting is, I mean, things would have to go absolutely as terrible as possible for you to lose that.
Yeah, I just absolutely destroyed it for that one. And part of it was just the randomness of the income. So it says that it will earn X number of buttons on the bottom of the card if you pass a button. I just kept getting lucky that the tile it was picking was never sending it over the income marker at the times when it would have gotten the most buttons.
Yeah, one of my games that kept happening, that whenever it was supposed to get high income, it never passed. And every time it got a 0 income, that's when it was passing those tiles.
Yeah.
So it got very, very few points.
So it can be a little swingy like that.
Right. But if you're playing at the harder settings, the way you calculate points will definitely start to even that out. Because even though it's not getting the button income, it is getting a lot more points for the tiles it's picking up, and it's typically picking for the purposes of scoring high value tiles.
Yeah, which I like. It's very obvious to me that I fall right now maybe on the level 2 or 3 difficulty for this game, and that would be a good challenge for me. But if I got better at it, I feel like there's good room to grow here, because it doesn't seem like an unfair boost in difficulty at each level. And I think they include 5 right in the box, which is really nice. Normally it's like easy, medium, and hard. I like that growth. And I've seen online that people who have played this a lot tend to stick right around 3 to 4 difficulty and have a very hard time moving to 5.
I can't imagine ever winning at the 5 difficulty level.
Surely they put it in the box because you can win, right? That's what I tell myself.
Right. I mean, they just get points for everything. That's just unfathomable to me. Yeah, I was about 3. I won 2 games at 3, which, I mean, you can really just say whatever difficulty almost after the fact, except for the 7-point tile, I guess. But yeah, I won 2 games at 3, and I won them, but they weren't crazy wins.
I had a similar experience. I feel like one of the games was really close, and I beat it just by maybe a point or 2 at level 3. I think I like that difficulty level. I like the tension that I might lose and even probably will lose, but I could pull it out. I don't know. I think that's nice. And it does a good job, I think, of simulating another player's presence at the table. Now, I say that because there are 2 decks in this game. One of them has where you just flip over the card and you see all the information you need to. But that second deck is the same as the first, except that on the back of the card, you can see how much the AI is going to have to work with on its turn. It'll show the buttons that it will have in its supply. I really like that because it doesn't change a huge amount, right? It doesn't change how it feels to any great extent, but it's similar to just being able to look across the table and see what your opponent has. You know? And that's a big part of playing Patchwork is, okay, I can look at what you've got and see you've got this much. I bet you'll try to take this tile on the next turn. So, I don't know. I really like how that worked. It felt very similar to me to playing a human opponent.
Yeah. I think it's nice to have that on there. The first time I played it, I was expecting it to feel more different or to make a bigger difference than it did. So, I mean, yeah, it's a nice little thing. And it does kind of emulate that, like being able to look at the resources of the player across the table from you. But it didn't make quite as it's called the tactical deck. And so I was thinking like, oh, this is going to be more tactical. And it's really a really minor difference in my mind.
That is true. I did expect it was going to be a bigger deal than just printing that on the other side. But I don't know. I like what it adds, though I see your point. It leads you to believe it's going to be a little something more.
Right.
So when you're paying $10 or whatever, what you're essentially paying for is 2 copies of one 12-card deck.
Right.
With one very slight variation. So when you think about it in that sense, suddenly it sounds a lot more expensive. Although if you're a person who already has Patchwork and you like playing it a lot and you just think it would be fun to play solo, $9 to convert a game that you love to a solo experience that is definitely smooth and viable is not really that bad.
Right.
So, I don't know, think about that how you will, but I found it to be a very enjoyable game.
Yeah, I had a really good time. I mean, it's just a pleasant, enjoyable game. It worked well, it's fast, doesn't really add a lot of overhead.
Breezy.
Yeah.
Right? It's easy to get through, but it does have more difficult decisions than you would think.
Yes.
So I think it's time probably for us just to get down to the good, the bad, and the ugly for this game. And the good here, there's quite a bit of good. I really love the button economy. That is really one of the more compelling ideas I've ever seen in this style of game before. And for all of the polyomino games that Uwe Rosenberg has done at this point, there's really not another game that does this, to my knowledge. None of his trilogy of games does anything quite like this. And A Feast for Odin does have an income mechanic associated with polyomino tiles, but it's not the same.
It's not the same. It's more of like multi-purpose than kind of all fitting together.
Yeah. I don't know. It just feels different and unique to me. I really like that a lot. And the time thing.
Yeah. It's all just very well balanced.
Yeah, it is well balanced. And at the end of the game, you feel like you've made some good decisions and you have played a game.
Yes.
And yet it only takes you 20 to 30 minutes to play. That's really nice for me.
Yeah.
And the AI deck, I really like how it's done. I think it's well made. I think that the tactical deck is what I would prefer to play with, but only just barely.
Yeah.
And it provides a very smooth way to play one player. And I would even go so far as to say I enjoy it more as a two-player experience, but it's neck and neck for me. I don't think you add that much by playing a human player here.
I think I would still prefer it with two people. Probably a little bit more so than you do, but yeah, I mean, it's still a good experience solo.
Yeah, and the addition of the difficulty levels and how variable everything is at setup, I think is pretty cool. It's not a huge amount of variability. It's not player powers or anything like that, but everything's going to play out just a little bit differently every game.
Right, and that's just like the core variability like baked into the game.
As for things that are bad for me, I'm just going to come out and say it. I know a lot of people like the theme here. I don't really. I find it boring. I find the color choices boring. I don't know if bad is the right thing here. It's bad for me. That's what I'll say. I know this works for a lot of people, and they really like the theme here, or at least they find it inoffensive. I also find it inoffensive, but it just is bland to the point of, when I look at it on my shelf, it's hard for me to say, yeah, that's the one. That's what I want to play right now. And I don't need exciting themes, right? King Domino is not an exciting theme, but it's so bright and vivid and inviting that if I want a very light, kind of breezy experience, right now that's probably what I'm going to pull out over this.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I didn't really think about. Like I'm fine with the theme. It doesn't really bother me at all. But when you did mention about how you wish it was brighter and more colorful. It dawned on me. I was like, yeah, it would definitely be nice if this was a little bit more vivid.
Yeah, it's surprising that it makes that big of a difference to me, but I just think it does. There's something about engaging something that's colorful and inviting that impacts my enjoyment of a game personally. As for things that are ugly about the game, I just think the only thing here that I'm going to say is ugly is how those pieces are cut. I don't understand how this happened. Even if it's just my copy of the game, there's some kind of production problem here, and it's bad.
It's just one of those things that the very first piece I tried to put in that didn't fit. It's just like, it's a minor thing and it sounds so nitpicky, but it's just kind of mind-blowing that a game that this is like the core thing of it, that all the pieces wouldn't fit together.
Yeah,
that's a bizarre or oversight to me.
It really is. There are very few games where I feel like the components impact the functionality of the game in a negative way. You know, there are plenty of games that have chintzier components than I would like or whatever, but this is actually a problem. I want to be able to look at my board when I'm done and say, look at this thing that I've created. That's the part of the point of a tile laying game. And yet I get done and I look down at my board and it's like this wobbly mess that doesn't fit together. And if somebody gave me this quilt, I would throw it away pronto.
Yeah, I don't think I had any problems with it just by chance on most of my games, but the very first game I played, I think there were like 3 different like little sections where pieces didn't fit together, so it was real wonky looking.
Yeah. I mean, it's bad enough that the thing is 50 shades of beige anyway, right? But right. The fact that it doesn't fit together, I don't know. It's just, this is definitely an ugly thing for the game for me. So I do really enjoy this game. I had a good time with it, but nothing about it really grabbed me in quite the way that I wanted it to. It's a fun game, and I had fun playing it solo, but it's not stomp of approval worthy for me.
Right. It's a solid game. Lots of great things about it, but it's just, there's nothing that's just like unbelievably compelling or just like captures me about it.
Now, for a lot of you, I think this is going to be an automatic purchase. If you play Patchwork with your significant other, or you just like playing it 2-player, and you just don't get it to the table as often as you want, this is a no-brainer. $9 is maybe a bit expensive for essentially 2 sets of 12 cards that function the same. But honestly, what it does to convert this to a solo experience, how smoothly it does it, I think it's worth picking up. For me, it's probably not going to hang around in my collection just because the artwork and the theme do enough to drag it down for me, and the pieces, that I'm not going to pick this over something like King Domino if I want a really breezy experience. But it's not bad at all. I recognize that it's a good game, and it does a few things really well.
Yes.
So that's all we've got for you this episode. If you haven't yet, you should check us out on Facebook or Instagram. You can follow us on there and see what we've been playing or looking at on there. You can also go onto iTunes and rate and review the show. That sounds like a very small thing, but it does a lot to make this show more visible so that other people can find it and learn about the world of solo games. And if you haven't heard already, we do have our own micro badge on Board Game Geek now. So you can go on to Board Game Geek, find the Solosaurus fan micro badge, and sport your love for the show. If you don't have enough Geek Gold for it, because I know it's hard to come by, just send me a message on Board Game Geek. You can search Solosaurus and find me, no problem. I'm happy to tip you the amount that you need to actually get the thing, because I'd love to see more people who have it out there. So just send me a message and we'll get it taken care of. Until next time, I'm Brandon Waite.
I'm Carter Mackey.
And this is Solosaurus.